Braveheart walked in and was like, "Y'all can just leave."
I don't really know who it was. All I knew is she was like,
she had long dark hair, or was it up?
I don't really remember, to be honest.
I've never had her, but I've always seen her, and she's
good.
feels short. Is she?
Yeah. I took her for pretty much all the business classes. She can get off track sometimes, but
Okay though.
yeah.
Get a little break.
Rachel, you're
My little brother's on his way. They were parking.
oh, I guess so quiet. I don't know.
Yeah, no. They should be here in like just a second. No, and my mom had meetings all day, and the person that normally walks in has a class from 2 to 2:15, so I was like, well, I guess he gets to sit in on calculus today. I'm sure he'll love that.
Does he have like video games or something?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. -2 equals negative minus this. And then
There you go. Can't have that.
hey, Mike, you can sit right there.
Didn't get any bad weather your side of town?
You know, when I woke up this morning, I thought, did it even rain? But
Yeah,
of
me
course, you know, and I thought surely I didn't sleep through something really bad, but I didn't have many limbs. I didn't have much of anything.
I heard that the bad stuff just missed Tallahassee, so I don't think it really made it
That's where I
quite this
was.
far.
That's where I was.
That was not
I
where
lived there.
was.
So we were lucky.
Yes.
It was a little bit of a heavy rain down here in Madison. Really not heavy, but there's some rain and a lot of wind.
That wind was worse here than
Yeah.
there. It's like I got out of the car and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I was at like 5, just waiting. Couldn't fall back to sleep really.
yeah, I couldn't. I was watching the weather last night. I thought it was like 1:30, and I thought, I need to go to bed. Thought it would be
Mr. Harris, I can't figure out how to rework the one you told me to redo.
Which one?
But it's okay, 'cause I know I got the bonus right now. This big old mess over here.
We said write that as a negative. So do it as change. Write it as to the -2 power. And I don't know. I don't know if that bonus is correct.
No, don't do that.
But I mean, it's the bonus though. It's the bonus.
Yeah, but if I get the bonus right and I
Distract
get the other
yourself
one
from the
wrong, then it'll be okay. It'll cancel each other out. Then again, if I get another B, it'll still be okay. I just need a B overall. This is an election.
If you have that quiz ready to give me, I'll take it. Any work to show on this? I always.
Oh, do you?
How do I know you just did go?
You see, it takes me about 10 tries to finally get something.
Yeah,
Did you have your book?
I have no clue where it is.
Always turn it in. Then I could give part credit if it's not right. Otherwise, I just have to. Once you do it, you don't have to distribute.
Oh, so I just have this as a final answer?
Yeah, if that's correct.
Oh, don't do that. I'm just
I
gonna
see
guess it's
something.
correct.
I see something missing, and I
You see
think
something missing?
look at it closely.
This whole.
But I'll be glad to mark it in red.
No, that's not good.
Still,
You stole my chair? Oh,
you can do that one. Hey, look, Jordan. That's his
I
foot.
feel like that's wrong, but it'll work out easier. Yeah, and I know all of this
You got
is
this
right,
ready?
so that's all that matters.
Okay.
X to the third.
Oh, I love that.
I had
See,
that
see
around.
how some people attach their work? Not that that's the best.
Yeah, I ran out of room.
I thought I touched the whole thing.
Yeah, you didn't want my whole paper for that. It was a little bit messy.
It did not work out.
That'll be my pencil.
You don't have a sheet?
Yeah, I was doing the work and like I kept checking
I
over
might
it
have
and
one.
stuff. So like half my paper was just checking over it. I was like, wait a second, I forgot to
Oh, I
write
see
the
what you're
zero.
saying.
So,
I see what I did wrong, Mr. Harris. I
You know it's fine.
found my notes. Is it not found it? Found it.
Down?
Seriously?
yeah, well, it's the worst feeling. Like, doing all that work and already having it.
No, it's that. How do you want to if that was negative?
How do you work it?
Negative two.
Oh.
I'll remind you in red what it should be.
But this part, I was also missing this, wasn't I?
Oh, so
Okay,
Yeah,
when you
that
take the
should,
derivative,
yeah,
it should
it
be.
had to be there. But I thought you had something out there, but I was looking at the same column.
Oh, no, I didn't have that. I just had the stamps. But
Because
that's
see, it should
okay.
have been negative two, so that would have made it negative three.
I was close though.
Look at this. Oh, you filled it?
Yeah.
It's for sure. It's from.
so like at the end, I was like after I showed up and worked the intervals, I was like,
Did you have any questions on relative maximum and minimum?
Number
I'm so bad.
65. This is page 260. F of x equals x plus 9 over x. I'm going to write it x plus 9x to the negative 1 plus 2. And it says find the relative max and min, if any. So we know how to do that. Our procedure was, first, we'll find f prime of x. What would you say that is?
minus
Okay. And I'm going to write that as 1 minus 9 over x squared. Then we want to find the zeros of that, right? The critical numbers. So I'll set it to 0. So 1 would equal 9 over x squared. Clear the fraction. X squared equals 9. So x would equal
plus or minus.
plus or minus 3. Okay. Well, let's see. If that's the case, then we will if we wanted to find the ordered pairs, we could say if x is 3, 3 plus 3, 6 plus 2 is 8. And if x is negative 3, negative 3 plus negative 3. Negative 6 plus 2, is that negative 4? And that seems like that would be, if we did this correctly, this would be the relative max, and this would be a relative min. And if you wanted to, we could verify it graphically. I could graph x plus 9 over x plus 2. X plus 9 over x plus 2. I'll look at that. X plus 9 over x plus 2. Okay. If I just used a standard window, would that be good enough? This point, does that look like negative 3, negative 4? Was that it? That looks about right, doesn't it? And does that look like 3, 8? We could verify that with our second calc, but just to verify that seems correct, this would be a relative. Actually, that's a relative min, and that's a relative max.
Yeah.
I'm glad we looked at it, right? Good. This was a relative. This was a relative max. This was a relative min. Because that was 2 branches, wasn't it? The max was down here, and the min was up here. So that's good. That was worth looking at the graph for to actually get it correct.
So you can't generally you can't always assume that because it's positive it's your max.
The reason we couldn't is that's not a continuous function because it has an x in the denominator. So it's going to be in 2 pieces. It'll have asymptotes. And with it having that asymptote, that's what reversed it. So when you're looking at the top of that bottom hump and the bottom of that. Okay. Good. That was a good one. But do you feel comfortable with that procedure? Finding the derivative, setting it to 0 to find your critical numbers, and then finding your ordered pairs for the maximum. Okay. Let's see. Any others of those give you trouble? I know a lot of you probably spent time on the quiz and didn't do much of this because you've admitted that to me. And honesty is the best policy. So, but make sure over the weekend you can do this homework and feel good about it, and we can do any more on the review day on Monday. But what we want to do now, I guess, is finish our notes, and the only section left is 4.4 in this unit. Okay? And this won't be much new, just maybe one little extra twist to it to what we did last time. Page 306. Okay. What if, for this last problem, what if for the last problem I didn't want to look at the whole function? What if I said for a specific interval, what is the max and what's the min? If it's a closed interval, and a continuous function within that, I can tell you exactly the absolute smallest value and the absolute largest. And that's what we want to do today. So here is your definition for that. If we define the absolute maximum as the largest value of f of x for all x in the domain, okay? And the absolute minimum, the smallest value of f of x for all x in the domain. And this says a function may or may not have an absolute extrema. For instance, the one we just looked at, right? This goes up forever and down forever. So there is no absolute max and min. We had relative ones within a certain region, right? But it didn't have an absolute largest value. But if I give you a closed interval, it will. So that's what we want to mention for this. So there's your definition for absolute max and min. And here's how we'll find them. Well, let's get this theorem first. If f of x is continuous on the closed interval from a to b, then f of x has both a max and a min value on that interval. Okay. How would we find those? To find the maximum and minimum on a closed interval, find all critical numbers in that interval. Once you do that, you're going to compute f of a, this endpoint, f of b, the other endpoint, and f of c for every critical number in that interval. So I'll find the value of the function at the lower end of the interval, the upper end, and every critical number inside there. And I'm going to pick the highest and lowest. That's what that's saying. The largest of these is the absolute max. The smallest is the absolute min. That's this whole section. So the only thing we did last time, right, was we would just find the critical numbers and find the relative max and min. But if I have a closed interval, I'll find what the function is at these values and all the critical numbers inside, and I'll pick the highest and the lowest, and that will be my absolute highest and lowest values. Absolute max and min. So, let's practice. Number 20 is a good one to start with on 306. Number 20. Are you cold? Are you okay? Cold?
Put it up a little bit.
That 20 says g of x equals x cubed plus 3x squared minus 1. And the interval they want us to look at, find the absolute max and min on -3 to 1. Okay? So let's go ahead and find the critical numbers that are in that interval. What is the derivative?
3x squared plus 6x.
If I set that to 0 to find my critical numbers, how would I factor that? 3x comes out.
Plus
2.
-2 is 0.
So either 3x is 0 or x plus 2 is 0. So x is 0. X is 2. Okay. Are those both in my interval or not?
Yes.
They are. Both of those critical numbers are inside my interval. So this is what I want to do. I want to find g of -3, this endpoint. I want to find g of -2, that critical number. G of 0, that critical number. And what else? G of 1. I want to find the function value at each of those, pick the highest and lowest, and I've answered my question. If I put -3 in here, that's going to be -27 plus 27 minus 1. Would you agree with that? Okay. If I put -2 in, -8 plus 12 minus 1, what's that? 3. If I put 0 in, what do I get? And if I put +1 in, is it 3 again?
Yes.
So, we would say the absolute max for that function in that interval is what? What's the highest value we got? 3. And that happened at x is equal to -2 and 1, right?
Mhm.
So my absolute max was 3 and it happened at 2 x values. What's the absolute minimum? -1. And that happened when x was -3 and 0. So that's what they wanted. And you can verify that with your graph if you wanted to. On that interval of x values, where is it the highest and where is it the lowest? Usually you don't have it happening at 2 different x values for both of those. Usually it's 1 point is the highest and 1 is the lowest. But that one had 2 each. Okay.
So the absolute max and min, those are your f of A and f of B.
Yes. In other words, the y value. What's the highest y value and the lowest? All right.
And the step before that is our f of C's.
Yes. This was f of A. This was f of B. And these were my f of C's. Those were my critical numbers. 0 and -2. So the only difference now is I have to test these endpoints. What if one of those gave me the largest or smallest, and the critical numbers didn't? You know, we would need to know which is the absolute largest and which is the absolute smallest. Try 28. Mark that one as a good one. How could I write 4 square root of x so I could actually do something with it?
X to the 1/2.
X to the 1/2. And that says it's on 0 to 9. Find the absolute max and min on that closed interval. Help me with the derivative. What is g prime? Would that be easier if I wrote it 1/4 x minus what? That's what it means, right? If I drop that x to the 1/2 to the denominator and square root of x downstairs. I don't know if that would actually be a good idea here to write the radical or just leave it as x to the 1/2. Let's just do that. Let's leave it x to the 1/2. What will I do to this? Okay. So I've got 1/4 x equals 2 over x to the 1/2. Would 4x to the 1/2 clear all the fractions at once? Would that do it? So if I multiply both sides by 4x to the 1/2, the 4's would cancel, but I would have x to what power? 1.5, which is 3/2, right? That would be x to the first plus 1/2. And then if I multiply both sides by the 4x to the 1/2, this would be an 8, wouldn't it? Okay. What would I do to get x? How would I undo a 3/2 power? Raise both sides to the reciprocal, right? To the 2/3 power. So that's going to give me x equals, what's the cube root of 8? The cube root is 2, and what's 2 squared? So is that my only critical number? The cube root of 8 squared? If you do that on your calculator, do you get that? If you say 8 to the 2/3, do you get 4? Okay. Good. So one critical number. So all I have to find, I need to find g of what? 0, 4, and g of 9. Endpoints and the critical numbers. What's g of 0? If I put 4 in there, 16 over 8 is 2. Negative 6. And if I put 9 in there, 81 eighths minus 12. Is that correct? If I get a common denominator, is that 96 eighths? 81 minus 96? Is that right? Negative 15 eighths with a common denominator? So my absolute max is 0, isn't it? And what's my absolute min? The highest it went was 0. The lowest it went was negative 6. If you didn't believe that, if you didn't trust your work, you could always graph it, couldn't you, to verify it? Okay. All right. So that would be, those would be my answers. I think the book gives the answers as 0 and negative 6. I sort of like ordered pairs. I would like you to say maybe 0, 0, and 4, negative 6, but this is fine. If you showed me that, I'm fine with that.
Are you going to want all of them in the interval?
Yes, and they were, right? Four fell inside the 0 to 9, so I had to find all 3 of those values, and I would pick the highest of those and the lowest for my answers.
So if it's not in there, just ignore it.
Yeah, if I had another critical number that was like a 10, I would just leave it out because that's not in my interval, and it wouldn't play in. These aren't too bad, are they? They probably could be, right? Like if you got a little further down there. But, okay. But you'll let me know Monday if you have trouble, right? How about 40? Says, an apartment complex has 100 two-bedroom units. The profit is given by this function. P of x is negative 10x squared plus 1760x minus 50,000. To maximize the monthly rental profit, how many units should be rented out? And what is the maximum monthly profit? Okay. First of all, they didn't give me an interval, but what would you assume the interval is if x is the number of units?
0 to 100.
Yeah, because that's what they said, right? They said there were 100 units, so it would have to be 0 to 100. Good. Couldn't go outside that because if you said 0 to infinity, they don't have an infinite number of apartments, do they? So, okay. What is P prime?
Negative 20x plus 1760.
That's not bad, is it? If I set that to 0, 60, what is it? 88? 88 falls within that interval. And would you agree that the profit at 0 units, you lose a lot of money, don't you? Right? And if you plugged in 100, you probably would want to check that. But basically, that's going to be the highest, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So all I need to do is I need to find out And it would be easy if we just put it in our calculator. If I put in negative 10x squared, what is the rest of that? Negative 10
Plus 1760.
plus 1760x minus 50,000. If I go to my table, and I'm going to delete what's there, if I put in 0, lose money. If I put in 88, there's a nice profit. And if I put in 100, less. So even if they rent them all, they make less than renting just 88. That's nice, isn't it? So your absolute maximum profit would be $27,440, and they rent 88. Not bad. What if it's more work to have to maintain them all? What if they had to hire more people to clean or more maintenance staff or something? So that would probably be an issue.
So what do we do if we don't have any critical numbers in the interval?
You would just test the endpoints of your interval and pick the highest and lowest. So that happens sometimes. Sometimes you might find no critical numbers, and all you're left with is the interval, and you would say, my absolute max happened here, and my min happened here, or vice versa. How about 42, different subject? Flight of a rocket. 42 says, the altitude attained by a model rocket in t seconds is given by this function h of t. 1/3 t cubed plus 4t squared plus 20t plus 2. What's my interval here? 0 to infinity. Okay. Find the maximum altitude. Help me with the derivative. What is h prime?
Negative t squared plus 8t plus 20.
Okay.
Could we write that as a quadratic?
I could divide out a negative 1 and have t squared minus 8t minus 20. Yeah. Yes. So if I factor it, 10 2 minus plus would give me the negative 8, is that right? So t would equal 10 seconds or t would equal negative 2 seconds. Which of those would not work? That's not in my interval, is it? Negative 2 seconds. So I guess 10 seconds would be my max. Because if I put in 0, it's 2, isn't it? Did it ask me for that or just the number of seconds? Find the maximum altitude. They want the altitude. So once I find 10 seconds is my magic number, let's find h of 10. Oh. I guess I want to use the calculator, don't you? On my table. If we type that in, negative 1/3 x to the third plus 4 squared. Whoa, no. Okay. Third, and we come out of that. Plus 4 squared plus 2 plus 2. If I go to my table and I delete, if I put in 10 seconds, that's the maximum height of the rocket. Okay. And if you graphed it, you would probably see that on the positive side. If we graphed it, if I went up to, what if I said x max was, how about 0 to 20 seconds? And then I went up to, we said 300 or so for y max. Does that bear out what we said? Does that look like it would happen in about 10 seconds? And you could do your calc max. Second, calc max. Left bound, right bound, and hits. If you see all those 9s, that means 10, doesn't it? Because remember, it's doing iterations there. It's doing iterations, so it's actually 10, but it's telling you 9.9999. That's 10. Okay. Close enough? And we got, what did it say in our table? It said 268.67, and that's exactly what you got. Good. 46. And can I apologize in advance for that one? We're not going to enjoy it, but we got to do it. It's a good example. Let's see. You know, sometimes I complain about ones like 42 where it looks like they set the function up to make it easy when you take a derivative. But then I also complain about 46 where the functions look horrible with all the decimals. So I just can't be happy, can I? So that's just good. Quantity demanded is related to price per compact. This equation, P equals, that they give there, denotes the unit price in dollars. And we're talking about a recording of Moonlight Sonata. Okay? X is the number of discs demanded. Right? Relates the demand to the price. They give you the cost function. I'll go ahead and write that down. C of X is, in descending order, negative and 4 zeros. X squared plus 2x plus 600. Is that right? I just wrote it in descending order. Just make sure my eyes are seeing 4 zeros to the right of the decimal.
Yeah.
Okay. And they tell me my interval for the cost function is 0 to 20,000. Okay. For the revenue function, right, we just have to take P times X, don't we? So for R of X, they said that P is negative 0.30 for 2x plus 6, and that times x. P times x is your revenue. This is the selling price per disc times the number of discs. All right. Remember we've done that in the previous section where they gave us P was the price per compact disc and times x the number of discs. So that's just P times X, if you want to say that somewhere. And this is P times X. I'll go ahead and write that as negative 0.0042 X squared plus 6X. Okay. Then, of course, they want me to find the profit, all right? So we got to find the profit function and then maximize that.
Does the parameters on the equation for P have anything to do with it?
So are they saying that in the demand function it's only up through 12,000, isn't it? So let's say 0 to 12,000. Okay. So we might have to limit it to that since the cost went up to 20, but the intersection of the two would be 0 to 12,000, wouldn't it? So that's probably what we would use. Since the revenue couldn't go above 12,000. Profit. Ugly, right? This minus this. Ouch. Revenue minus cost. So 0, 0, 4, no, 0, 0, 0. Or 2x squared plus 6x minus that whole big thing. 2x plus 2x plus 600. Okay.
Only 0.0004.
Here's my question. Would you prefer to take the derivative in that form once you distribute the negative, or do you want to combine? Probably combining's the best, but it's not going to be too fun. What did you say this was? Negative 0.00042 plus that one. It's going to be
4. But just like 0.0004.
okay. 0.0004 x squared, and it would be negative. Yes. Good. 6x minus 2x if I distributed my negative. Plus 4x. That wasn't too bad. Okay. Help me with p prime. Negative 1. Plus 4. Well, it gets better now, doesn't it? If I set that derivative to 0, negative 0.0008x equals negative 4. When I divide, so my only critical number you said was what?
12,000.
Is that within my interval 0 to 12,000? So I assume that's going to be my maximum profit happening at 5,000 bits. If they produce and sell 5,000, that will be the max profit. You could check, if I put 0 in here, I lose $600. So P of 0 would be that. If I put in 12,000, you might want to check that, but I'm almost sure that it's going to be smaller than when you put in 5,000. But you would want to verify that. Now, how did they ask that? They said,
How many copies should be produced in this month?
we answered that, didn't we? They didn't say what was the profit. They said how many copies, so that would be that many CDs, right? That many bits. Okay. So I didn't actually have to plug that back into P to find what the profit was, and that's nice that we didn't have to do that. Is that a hint? 56 looks pretty good. 56.
I was afraid of them catching the whole school. I was tuning every hour.
That's surprising.
I was glad they didn't, because we've already missed so many Monday Wednesdays, right? And I told you we're behind already, and I just didn't want to stress you out. So it's good. It's good we're here. We're glad, aren't we? This time they say P is equal to 50 over 0.01x squared plus 1. This time, what's my interval?
0, 0, 1.
20. Okay. To yield the maximum revenue, how many watches must be sold? So what is R of X?
50x over. Yeah, you just have x to 50.
This fraction times X, so that would just be 50x over 0.01x squared plus 1. Okay. What's going to be necessary to find R prime?
Chain rule or quotient.
Probably quotient. You could bring this up and do a chain, but it would be a chain and a product, wouldn't it? And I wouldn't want to probably think about that too much. So if we say what? Denominator times what? Derivative of numerator minus numerator times derivative of denominator. 102x. All divided by x squared plus 1 squared. Okay? All right. Is this going to be 0.5x squared. So let me write it. 0.5x squared plus 50 minus x squared over 0.01x squared plus 1 squared.
Do it like that.
R prime is at negative 0.5 x squared plus 50. You know what's good about this though? It doesn't look good, but what is good? If I set this to 0, what's the only thing I have to worry about?
Where do you get the negative from?
Would that be 1/2 minus 1?
Oh.
0.5 minus 1 would be negative 0.5. Okay? But remember, if I set a fraction to 0, I'm only interested in when the numerator is 0, right? So I just have to say negative 0.5x squared equals negative 50. X squared equals so what's x? Would I need the minus
You already know that's
in my interval? Would that be good? So we're saying the revenue would be maximized, we assume, when x is 10, what were they? Watches. I would want to say, before you finish that problem, you probably would want to say, well, what's the revenue when you sell 0, which would be 0? What would be the revenue when you sell 20? But I'm assuming this would be your maths. But if you want to really be sure, you want to test those, wouldn't you? So, okay. These aren't that hard, are they? The only difference was, if you have a closed interval, you want to find the critical numbers inside there and find your function at the endpoints and all critical numbers. But most of the applications, it's going to happen at the critical number. One of them. So, the ones I want you to try, I think I marked any others that we should work. These are the ones that I think are good. From page 307. How about 7 through 47 every other odd? 51 and 55. Okay. So make a note that Monday we are going to review and we'll have take home quiz 6. I'll hand out, it'll be due Wednesday, and then Wednesday what happens? Test 2 over chapter 3, what we did up through 3.6, I think, and 4.1 and 4.4. And I'll have a review sheet, it's already on D2L, I think, just with the topics and the sections, but we will review, and I will hand back this quiz that you gave me, and I will hand out that last quiz that will be due Wednesday. And hopefully, this is what I hope. I'm hoping that if you didn't do last period's homework, you do that homework, you do this one, and you have good questions. Start looking over things, see if there's things you don't remember, and we will review and get ready for that test, and hopefully it'll be a good grade. And we'll move
So
on.
test 2 is
Sections 3.1 through 3.4. I think we skipped 3.5, didn't we?
Yeah.
So 3.1 through 3.4, 3.6, and then 4.1, 4.4. And it's all listed on D2L on that review sheet. I think I posted it. And I'll bring that with me, or we'll look at it. So, yeah, we're out 30 minutes early, but we could have had all day on, so I guess that's okay. All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Cutting this short. Full hour, 15 minutes.
Well, I'm willing to stay if you like.
I was expecting to go to the next unit already.
It's okay.
What are we doing next?
I was super confident too. It's like, you know what?
Let's see. It's fine. You'll have what? You'll have 2x, and then you have to do product rule on that.